Staff Sergeant Elena Vega crouched beside Private Jake Tanner on the firing line at Camp Silverback, her steady hands adjusting his tactical vest as he trembled like a leaf in a windstorm. The Nevada sun was merciless at 0800 hours, turning metal hot enough to brand flesh and making the air shimmer like broken glass. Before continuing this story, please comment below with your city or country where you're watching from. Your feedback inspires us to do better. Easy there, Jake, Elena said quietly, her voice cutting through the chaos of the training range. First time's always rough. Remember what I taught you about breathing under pressure? Jake nodded gratefully, the terror in his young eyes slowly giving way to determination. He was one of those kids who'd either wash out in the first week or become something special. Elena had seen hundreds like him. Thanks, Sergeant. You're nervous. That's human. She patted his shoulder with calloused hands that had seen more action than most people could imagine. Stay close to me on the range. I'll show you how it's done. That's when Captain Marcus Kane approached, his perfectly pressed uniform and practice swagger announcing his arrival before his boots hit the sand. Behind him followed his usual pack of yes-men, Corporal Derek Stone, built like a prizefighter who'd forgotten how to lose gracefully, and Sergeant Mike Torres, whose perpetual scowl suggested the world owed him something significant. Vega, Kane's voice dripped with the kind of condescension that made seasoned NCOs want to commit career suicide. Playing nursemaid to the rejects again? This is supposed to be elite warrior training, not remedial babysitting. Elena stood slowly, her ice blue eyes never leaving Kane's face. At 32, she possessed the kind of unremarkable appearance that allowed her to blend into crowds. Average height, brown hair pulled back in regulation style, features that wouldn't stand out in a police lineup. But those who looked closer might notice how her gaze constantly swept for exits, how her hands never strayed far from her sidearm, how she carried herself with the fluid economy of someone who'd learned that wasted motion could mean death. Just helping a fellow soldier, sir, she replied evenly. Helping? Kane laughed, and his entourage dutifully joined in. Maybe you should tuck them in at night too. Tell them bedtime stories about the big bad enemy. Jake flushed red, but Elena's hand on his shoulder kept him silent. As you say, sir. Exactly as I say. Kane turned to his audience. Some people earn their way into elite programs. Others get here through diversity initiatives and bleeding heart politics. The words carried across the firing line, loud enough for half the company to hear. Elena watched them walk away, mentally cataloging faces and mannerisms. Old habit, like checking your six before entering a room or knowing where the nearest cover was at all times. The mission briefing came 3 days later in a stuffy concrete building that smelled of coffee and stale cigarettes. Major Sarah Cross stood before a map of the Syrian desert, her laser pointer dancing across terrain features that looked deceptively simple on satellite imagery. Intelligence indicates a high-value target compound approximately 30 clicks northeast of our forward operating base, Cross explained. 2 enemy commanders running training operations for insurgent forces. Quick in and out, capture or kill, intelligence gathering, home before breakfast. Kane leaned back in his chair with the confidence of someone who'd never had a plan go sideways when lives were on the line. Sounds like a milk run, Major. My team can handle this without breaking a sweat. Elena studied the map more carefully. The compound sat in a natural bowl surrounded by high ground. Perfect observation posts, multiple escape routes for defenders, limited approaches for attackers. Every tactical instinct she'd developed over 8 years of combat operations was sending up red flags. Sir, she said quietly, the terrain analysis shows... Nobody asked you, Sergeant, Kane cut her off. We've got this handled. Cross glanced between them. Sergeant Vega, you have concerns? The approach routes are limited, ma'am. If they know we're coming. If, Kane interrupted, we'll be in and out before they know what hit them. Trust me. Elena bit back her response. Trust was earned, not demanded. And Kane had never earned anything more dangerous than a paper cut. 24 hours later, Echo Company was inserting via helicopter into what military intelligence had described as a routine counter-terrorism operation. Elena sat in the bird's cramped cabin, watching the desert scroll by below, while her teammates checked weapons and reviewed the mission one final time. "Remember," Kane shouted over the rotor noise, "we own the night. These sand rats won't know what hit them." Stone and Torres nodded enthusiastically. Jake looked like he might throw up. Elena just stared out the window, noting how the moonlight revealed terrain features that hadn't shown up in the satellite photos. Ridgelines that could hide machine gun nests, ravines that could conceal entire squads, natural choke points that would funnel attackers into kill zones. She keyed her radio. "Falcon 1, this is Eagle 6. Recommend additional overwatch on the high ground." "Negative, Eagle 6, came Kane's reply. "We stick to the plan." Intel says minimal resistance. Intel also said Saddam had weapons of mass destruction, Elena thought but didn't voice. The insertion went smoothly. Too smoothly. Elena's team fast-roped from the helicopter into a landing zone that should have been covered by at least basic security. Instead, they found empty desert and silence so complete it felt like a held breath. "Where is everybody?" Stone whispered as they formed up for the approach march. "Probably sleeping," Torres replied. "These Hajis aren't exactly known for their military discipline." Elena checked her rifle for the third time and scanned the surrounding hills. Military discipline was exactly what she was worried about. The approach to the target compound took 40 minutes across broken terrain that channeled their movement into predictable routes. Elena counted at least 6 positions that would provide perfect overwatch of their advance, and every one of them appeared empty. "Too quiet," she muttered. "What was that, Vega?" Kane's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Nothing, sir. Just noting the lack of sentries. Told you this would be easy." "They're not expecting us. That was the problem." In Elena's experience, when the enemy wasn't where they should be, it usually meant they were somewhere worse. The compound materialized out of the darkness like something from a fever dream. Concrete walls topped with razor wire, guard towers that should have been manned but stood empty, vehicles parked with military precision in a motor pool that looked recently abandoned. "Looks like they cleared out," Stone observed. "Or they're waiting for us to come inside," Elena countered. Kane's response was predictable. "Vega, you're seeing threats where none exist. We go in hard and fast, grab what we can, get out. Simple." Nothing was ever simple. Elena had learned that lesson in a dozen hellholes across 3 different continents, usually the hard way. The breach went textbook perfect. Too perfect. The main gate was unlocked. The buildings were lit but unguarded. Documents sat on desks as if their owners had just stepped out for coffee. "This is wrong," Elena said into her radio. "Sir, this feels like—" That's when the world exploded. Muzzle flashes erupted from every direction at once. Rooftops, windows, spider holes that hadn't existed 5 minutes earlier. The distinctive crack of AK-47s, mixed with the deeper bark of machine guns, positioned for interlocking fields of fire. Elena dove behind a concrete barrier as bullets chewed chunks from the walls around her. Through her rifle scope, she could see the complex choreography of a perfectly executed ambush. Every firing position had been prepared, every angle calculated, every escape route blocked. "Contact!" Contact from all sides. Kane's voice had lost its arrogant confidence. "We're taking heavy fire from prepared positions." No kidding, Elena thought, but she was too busy staying alive to voice her sarcasm. Stone went down first, a burst from an elevated position catching him center mass. Torres tried to drag him to cover but took rounds to the shoulder and chest. Jake, the kid Elena had been mentoring, crumpled behind a shot-up vehicle with blood spreading across his uniform. "Echo 6, this is Eagle 1, Major Cross's voice crackled through the radio. "What's your status?" "We're trapped," Kane shouted. "This was a setup." "They were waiting for us." Elena low-crawled to Jake's position, her rifle tracking threats even as she moved. The kid was conscious but fading fast. "Stay with me, Jake," she whispered, applying pressure to his wounds. "You're going to be fine." But they both knew that was a lie. Without immediate medical evacuation, he had maybe 20 minutes. "All units, prepare for immediate withdrawal," Kane ordered. "We're pulling back to the LZ." Elena looked around the compound. Stone was down. Torres was down. Jake was dying. 3 other team members were wounded and unable to move effectively. Kane was cowering behind inadequate cover while enemy fire intensified from all directions. And then she saw them. 2 figures directing the battle from a fortified position on the highest building. One was pointing toward their wounded, coordinating fire to prevent evacuation. The other was speaking into a radio, probably calling in reinforcements to finish them off. Colonel Dmitry Volkov and Colonel Pavel Kozlov, the high-value targets they'd come to capture. Except they weren't running a training camp. They were running a trap. "Eagle 6, move to extract now," Kane screamed. Elena looked at Jake, at Stone, at Torres, at the men who'd followed orders into an ambush designed by professionals who understood American tactics better than most Americans. She made a decision that would either save her team or get them all killed. "Negative, Echo 6, she said into her radio. "I'm not leaving my people behind." "That's a direct order, Sergeant." "Then court-martial me later," Elena replied, checking her ammunition. "If we're all still alive." She had 180 rounds of 5.56 NATO, 3 fragmentary grenades, and absolute certainty that retreat would mean watching her teammates die in a foreign desert while their killers celebrated. Unacceptable. Elena's assault began from an angle no military textbook would recommend. Straight up the middle, using speed and violence of action to turn the enemy's prepared positions against them. Her first targets were the forward observers directing mortar fire on her team's position. 2 controlled bursts from her M4 eliminated the spotters, ending the indirect fire threat. "Single American operator attacking our main position," she heard through intercepted enemy communications. "All units engage immediately." But engaging Elena Vega was easier ordered than accomplished. She moved through the compound like smoke through a forest, using every piece of cover, every shadow, every advantage that 8 years of combat experience had taught her. Her rifle spoke with mechanical precision: target acquisition, controlled burst, movement, repeat. The first enemy soldier died while trying to coordinate with his squad leader. The second managed to fire a burst that went wide by meters. The third never saw her coming. Elena was using movement and terrain mastery to turn an impossible frontal assault into a series of individual engagements she could control. Her M4 had been customized for her fighting style: shortened barrel for close quarters, enhanced optics for rapid target acquisition, modified trigger for precise semi-automatic fire. By the time enemy forces realized what was happening, Elena had eliminated 8 fighters and was moving toward the command position where the 2 colonels were orchestrating the battle. "How is she moving through our kill zone?" Volkov screamed into his radio. The answer was training that had pushed her beyond normal human limitations, combined with equipment that responded to her will as naturally as breathing. Elena reached the command building's base and began her vertical assault. The structure was 3 stories of reinforced concrete designed to withstand small arms fire and explosive charges, but it hadn't been designed to stop someone who understood that the best way to attack a fortress was to get inside it. She used her remaining grenades to create diversions, then entered through a ground floor window while enemy attention was focused elsewhere. The interior stairs were narrow and offered limited angles, perfect for someone who preferred close-quarters engagement over long-range shooting galleries. Colonel Kozlov made the mistake of leaving his fortified position to assess the tactical situation personally. When he stepped into the stairwell, Elena's M4 was waiting for him. 3-round center mass, and the enemy deputy commander fell without firing a shot. "Kozlov is down," came the panicked transmission from the command post. "Repeat, Colonel Kozlov is KIA." Colonel Volkov made the same mistake his deputy had, trying to coordinate his forces from outside the protected position. When he emerged onto the roof to direct his fighters personally, Elena was ready. Her rifle spoke twice. 1 round shattered his radio. 1 round ended his command permanently. With both enemy commanders eliminated, the tactical situation collapsed for hostile forces. Without coordination, their overwhelming numerical advantage became meaningless. Individual fighters found themselves engaging an enemy who seemed to be everywhere at once, striking from impossible angles with lethal precision. Elena continued her assault through the enemy compound, her M4 speaking in controlled bursts that eliminated threats systematically. Each enemy position fell to tactics they couldn't counter: speed, precision fire, and absolute determination to complete the mission. Her ammunition counter showed 37 rounds remaining when she reached the final defensive position. 12 enemy fighters had concentrated in the highest tower, hoping to make a last stand that would at least eliminate the American operator who had destroyed their entire defensive plan. Elena approached from below, using dead space that couldn't be covered by their firing positions. When she appeared at close range, her M4 was already tracking multiple targets. 12 controlled bursts in 15 seconds, and the compound fell silent. The tactical assessment was devastating for enemy forces. 27 fighters eliminated, 2 colonels killed in action, command structure destroyed, defensive positions overrun by a single American operator using small arms and individual tactics that weren't supposed to exist. But Elena wasn't finished. At the highest point of the enemy compound, a flagpole displayed the colors of whatever nation or organization had trained and equipped these forces. Elena pulled down their banner and replaced it with an American flag she'd carried in her assault pack, the same flag that had covered her brother's casket when he died serving his country in Afghanistan 3 years earlier. As the stars and stripes rose above the captured position, Elena keyed her radio for the final transmission of the operation. Echo 6, this is Eagle 1. Compound secured. All hostiles eliminated. 27 KIA confirmed. The high ground belongs to us now. The radio silence lasted for nearly a minute. Eagle 1, Kane's voice carried disbelief, mixed with something that might have been shame. Report your current status. Operational and ready for extraction. I'll mark our position with smoke for helicopter pickup. Eagle 1, how did you just clear an entire enemy compound by yourself? Elena looked around at the enemy positions that had been designed to trap and eliminate an entire American unit. Bodies of enemy fighters lay scattered throughout bunkers that should have been impregnable to individual assault. I didn't clear their compound, Echo 6. I just decided it was our compound now. The extraction helicopter arrived 30 minutes later, guided by the smoke grenade Elena had deployed from the highest point of what was now American-controlled territory. When the surviving members of Echo Company climbed aboard, they found their teammate calmly field-stripping her M4 while sitting beneath the American flag she'd planted on enemy ground. Captain Kane sat down next to Elena as the helicopter lifted off from the desert terrain. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked like a man who understood the weight of command. "Vega," he said quietly, "what you accomplished back there. That's going to be written into every special operations manual in the military." "I just cleared the extraction route like the mission required," Elena replied without looking up from her weapon. "The team needed to get out safely. I made sure that happened. You turned a complete tactical disaster into total victory single-handedly." Elena looked out the helicopter window at the flag still flying from the compound below. "Sir, Americans don't abandon ground to the enemy without a fight. If they want to control terrain, they need to be prepared to pay for it." Kane nodded slowly. "I owe you an apology. And so does everyone who ever doubted your capabilities." "No apology necessary, sir. We all came home alive. That's what matters." But privately, Elena allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, not because she'd proven anything to Kane or his cronies, but because Jake Tanner would live to see another day. Because Stone and Torres would recover from their wounds. Because 27 enemy fighters would never ambush another American unit. The after-action report filed by Major Cross became required study material for Special Operations Command staffs throughout the military. The tactical analysis was unprecedented. One operator with standard equipment had successfully assaulted and captured a fortified complex defended by overwhelming numerical superiority. But the numbers only told part of the story. 6 weeks later, Elena Vega was back at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, officially recovering from minor injuries sustained during the operation, but unofficially planning her return to active deployment. The Pentagon wanted her to accept an instructor position. Her commanding officers wanted her to develop new individual tactics curricula. Military analysts wanted to study her techniques for integration into advanced training programs. Elena wanted to get back to her team. "You could have died out there," Major Cross told her during their first meeting after the mission. You had every tactical reason to withdraw with the team. Nobody would have questioned following direct orders. But 27 enemies would still be controlling that terrain, ma'am, Elena replied. And they'd be planning their next ambush against the next American unit that walked into their kill zone. Sometimes completing the mission requires going beyond the original orders. Cross studied her subordinate with newfound respect. Vega, you've redefined what's tactically possible for individual operators. What you accomplished exceeds anything in our doctrinal framework. Then maybe our doctrinal framework needs some updates, Elena said simply. 8 months later, Staff Sergeant Elena Vega was back in operational theater, leading special operations missions in multiple regions where her innovative tactics had proven that individual determination could overcome systemic disadvantages. Her M4 had been retired to the museum, replaced by an identical weapon that carried the same modifications and the same expectation of impossible precision. But among the operators she served with, Elena was known for something more important than tactical innovation. She was the warrior who proved that mission completion always took priority, that American terrain was never abandoned without maximum effort, and that sometimes one person with the right training and mindset could change the entire outcome of an engagement. The techniques Elena developed during that desert assault became part of advanced military training curricula. Instructors teach courses on single-operator complex clearing and individual assault tactics based on her methods, but they also teach something more fundamental, that elite warriors are defined not by their equipment or numerical advantage, but by their willingness to do whatever mission completion requires. 18 months after the desert operation, Elena received the Medal of Honor for her actions during the engagement. The citation read, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, at the risk of her life above and beyond the call of duty, while serving with a special operations element during combat operations against numerically superior enemy forces." The ceremony was held at the White House, attended by Elena's family, her military teammates, and senior leadership from multiple commands. But the moment that mattered most came afterward, when Jake Tanner, now fully recovered and serving as an instructor himself, approached Elena for a private conversation. "Sergeant," he said, "I need to tell you something. When you made that decision to assault their compound alone, I thought I was watching someone throw their life away, but now I realize I was watching someone save all of ours." "Jake," Elena replied, "new approaches are just old principles applied to situations that demand creative solutions. The mission always comes first." The impact of Elena's actions extended far beyond that single engagement. Intelligence recovered from the eliminated enemy commanders led to the disruption of multiple hostile training programs and the identification of several high-value targets. The psychological effect on enemy forces was significant. Knowing that American special operators could turn retreat scenarios into assault victories created operational uncertainty that affected enemy planning throughout the theater. But perhaps the most important result was what Elena's decision meant to the soldiers who served with her. They learned that tactical doctrine provided guidance, not limitations. They discovered that individual initiative, properly applied, could overcome overwhelming odds when combined with superior training and absolute mission focus. The desert compound Elena had captured was eventually abandoned for strategic reasons, but the American flag she'd planted there remained until environmental conditions finally claimed it. Intelligence sources reported that for months afterward, enemy forces avoided the area, referring to it as the place where the American storm lives. Elena continued serving in special operations for 4 more deployment cycles, participating in missions where her innovative individual tactics repeatedly transformed potential failures into decisive successes. She never again found herself in a situation requiring single-operator complex assault, but she faced numerous challenges that demanded creative solutions to seemingly impossible problems. In each case, she found ways to complete mission objectives while ensuring her teammates returned safely. "The thing about Vega," Major Cross explained to new special operations candidates during advanced training sessions, "is that she doesn't recognize the word impossible as applicable to mission parameters. When we thought we had to retreat, she found a way to advance. When we faced overwhelming opposition, she found a way to eliminate that opposition. That's what separates truly exceptional warriors from merely competent ones: the refusal to accept mission failure as inevitable. 3 years after the desert engagement, Elena Vega was promoted to Master Sergeant and assigned to establish the Individual Advanced Tactics program at the Special Operations Training Command. Her training facility became legendary among students, not only for the technical skills she taught, but for the operational mindset she instilled. Anyone can learn to operate military equipment effectively, she would tell each new class. The military will teach you weapon systems, movement techniques, coordination with teammates. But what the military cannot teach you is how to recognize when tactical situations require you to exceed every limitation you previously accepted. She would pause, observing faces eager to prove themselves in operational environments. The difference between competent operators and exceptional operators isn't equipment proficiency or physical capability. It's the ability to identify opportunities where others see obstacles. It's the determination to complete missions when mission completion seems tactically impossible. Students invariably wanted to hear about the desert assault, about the individual tactics that had eliminated 27 enemies and captured fortified terrain. Elena would share operational details, but she always concluded with the same fundamental lesson. I didn't survive that engagement because I possessed superior equipment or exceptional physical capabilities. I survived because I refused to accept that retreat was the only tactical option available. When my teammates needed secure extraction routes, I found a way to provide those routes. When enemies believed they controlled the tactical situation, I found a way to seize that control. She would make direct eye contact with each student. Every one of you will encounter situations where conventional responses lead to conventional results. Exceptional operators are those who find ways to achieve exceptional results when mission parameters demand excellence. Elena's instructional methods became the foundation for modern special operations, individual tactics training. Her techniques were analyzed at military academies, incorporated into operational manuals, and taught to allied special forces throughout the world. But her greatest contribution wasn't tactical, it was philosophical. She proved that individual initiative, properly trained and properly applied, could overcome systemic disadvantages and achieve strategic objectives that appeared impossible under conventional analysis. Years later, when military historians studied the evolution of special operations doctrine in the early 21st century, they identified several pivotal engagements that shaped modern warfare theory. The desert assault would be remembered as definitive proof that individual determination could overcome numerical superiority when combined with superior training and innovative tactical thinking. But among the special operators who served with Elena Vega, the lesson was simpler and more profound. Sometimes the most effective response to retreat orders is to advance so decisively that retreat becomes victory. The radio transmission that had seemed tactically impossible, one operator reporting the elimination of an entire enemy force and the capture of their terrain, became legendary throughout the special operations community. It represented the transformation of tactical disaster into strategic triumph through individual courage and creative problem-solving. Elena Vega had proven that sometimes the most important victories are achieved not by following established procedures, but by recognizing when established procedures need to be abandoned in favor of solutions that exceed conventional expectations. Fall back immediately had been the order. But Elena had interpreted that command as an opportunity to transform retreat into the most devastating counterattack the enemy would never anticipate. 27 enemies eliminated. Strategic terrain captured. American flag planted on ground that had belonged to hostile forces 4 minutes earlier. Because sometimes the most effective way to fall back is to advance so aggressively that there's nothing left to fall back from. Elena Vega didn't just survive an impossible tactical situation, she transformed it into a demonstration that individual American operators, properly trained and properly motivated, could overcome any obstacle when mission completion demanded extraordinary performance. And in proving that, she reminded everyone that the most powerful weapon in any warrior's arsenal isn't advanced technology or numerical superiority. It's the refusal to accept defeat when victory remains achievable through courage and tactical innovation. The desert wind still carries whispers of that day, when one soldier's refusal to retreat rewrote the rules of what was possible, and proved that sometimes the greatest victories come from the darkest moments, when everything seems lost and only will remains.